the clap is so important. You have no idea. No idea how important the clap is. No, because last time I tried it with the other person doing it with me, they did it like not the same time as me, and it just made it that much harder to sync everything up. So it's quite funny. The yell, yo! You need. That's your husband right there. Okay, so we're going to get started. We've been recording. Who knows how much of this I'll leave in and how much I will cut out. But this is...
Do I need to be in here or just come back in a couple minutes?
Come back in like, I don't know, that's my assistant for the day who's just jumping right into this. Give it like 15 minutes, I would come back. There you go. Episode 2, Artist Shooting Artists. Joining me this evening is Megan Wroe.
Hello.
Wroe, are you used to that last name yet?
It's getting there.
It's getting there. For those of you who don't know, which is probably everybody, Miss Wroe right here, Mrs. Wroe, excuse me, just recently married my best friend a few months ago. Great celebration. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was fun.
And she is gracious enough to lend me her time this evening. So as I point out in the first episode of this project of mine, when I look at my goal is to seek out artists, not just in the traditional sense, but into maybe some areas that are a little, I guess, obscure when you think of what it makes to be an artist. And today, we're going to be looking at what it's like to be a dietitian, because I feel like the time and effort goes into studying diets, and especially these days with concerns of just obesity, especially in America, it's a very difficult and probably prevalent task. So, quick, I guess, just shout outs. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, you can hit me up on Twitter. It's at Drew McCarroll, DREWMCCARROLL. There should be a link in the description, any email or anything like that. So we're just going to jump right into it. How you doing this evening?
I'm good.
Did you finish that glass of wine?
I didn't finish it yet. I put the rest in the fridge. I didn't want to have red cheeks for the video.
Oh, I'm sweating profusely because I just rushed to set everything up. So we'll see how that goes. So, dietitian.
Yeah.
Not a nutritionist.
Correct.
So it's a funny story because I know the N word, not that N word, but the nutritionist word is not. It's not good.
Right.
I was watching the Santa Claus over the holidays with Tim Allen, the great movie.
Obviously.
Might be my second favorite holiday movie.
What's the first?
Die Hard. Takes place during. It's a holiday movie. It counts.
All right.
But it's right when Tim Allen's character starts getting the jolly belly, and he makes a comment about, his dietitian has him on some new diet or whatever, or excuse me, his nutritionist. I was like, no, you don't say nutritionist. So what is the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian? Is a nutritionist even a thing, or?
It is. It is. Actually, all dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians.
Oh, so it's like this square rectangle theorem.
Exactly.
Math.
So, and actually, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has now changed our credentials to where we're allowed to call ourselves RDNs, registered dietitian nutritionists, instead of just RDs if we want to. I choose not to. I think it's redundant. But the reason they came up with that idea is because it was such this big battle of what exactly are we. So now our title encompasses all of the above because we are technically both. But anyone who does not have the RD, who does not have the dietitian involved, is not credentialed. So the way to get your RD is that you have to go through all of your prereqs, it's basically getting your bachelor's in nutrition. Okay. And then you have to apply and be accepted for an internship, which is usually a full year, depending on the program, of full-time work in all the different aspects of dietetics. And I'm talking lots of different aspects. Dietetics can be food service, it can be clinical, it can be outpatient, it can be in the school setting. There's all sorts of things that dietitians can do within this realm of nutrition. Okay. So you have to experience all of it in your internship, and it's pretty intensive. And then once you pass your internship, you have to take and pass your RD exam. That's what an RD is. Then you have your nutritionist, who basically, if you took a class in nutrition, Drew, you could call yourself a nutritionist.
All right. So basically what you're saying is any nutritionist watching this is going to be really mad at you.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry.
So lots of school.
Yeah.
I know you did a lot of intern work at the VA. What was it?
I did the VA in Los Angeles. That's where I did my internship. So.
And what did you focus on? I mean, did you have a specific focus while you were there, or was it just...
That's not the way. Most internships are very general. So they have kind of basic focuses. Like if I were to have my internship at CHLA, the Children's Hospital of LA, my internship would be focused on pediatrics.
Okay.
But most internships are pretty focused on all aspects of dietetics, like I was talking about. Some of them tend to be more food service based. Some of them tend to be more clinically based. Mine was clinically based, but I still got experience in all of the realms. I just happened to spend the majority of my time in some sort of clinical area.
Okay. So as a dietitian, like what does a dietitian do, or what is their main goal? Like what are you trying to promote or encourage as a dietitian?
Well, it kind of depends on what area of nutrition you're in. I would say overall, the goal of a dietitian is to make sure that your health is optimal based on what you're eating. So if you are a hospital inpatient dietitian, that means that whatever this person in the hospital is dealing with their diagnosis, you're prescribing them a diet that goes with their medication and with their diagnosis so that they can get out of the hospital. As an outpatient, you're basically counseling that person to make sure that they're eating well based on whatever their health needs are so that they can function in life with their food. Some dietitians are much more preventative, and so it's not necessarily you have this diagnosis and I am going to prescribe you a diet. It's I want you to eat this way so that you don't get all XYZ problems. And it just depends on that person's lifestyle, what works for them.
Okay. So I guess at the end of the day, like a dietitian is whatever role they're in, they're just basically trying to design a diet for a particular person that's going to have them living the healthiest.
Correct.
Okay. Very cool. I also know, so now right now you currently do a lot with, I think children. That was kind of what you've been. So childhood obesity is, I feel like these days it's a really big focus, especially in America. What have you noticed as being the hardest obstacle in kind of getting, I guess, children involved in their diets? Or I guess it comes down to is how to get their parents involved in like monitoring their diet.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge in working in pediatrics because you have to get everybody on board. When you work with an adult, you're really just working with that adult. And yes, they need a support system, but a lot of times an adult is able to fend for themselves and do things on their own. This child can be totally in love with what you're saying, but they're not going to do anything on their own. You have to get the parents to be doing everything. And sometimes mom is on board, but dad's not, and that creates an issue. So that is definitely the biggest barrier in pediatrics is dealing with not just the child, but the family and then the whole community as well. What are they able to access?
Okay. So if you were, let's say, working with a family new to trying to adjust a child's diet, what is like the first thing you might approach with them or suggest as like monitoring like what their intake? I'd assume it'd be like sugar intake. I feel like that's a big thing these days. Or is there something, I mean, is there a particular area that you've noticed a trend in that most kids who tend to be obese kind of find something, or does it depend on child to child?
It really varies. What we do in the outpatient setting is we take an assessment first. So I sit down with the child / the parents, and I just basically get them to do what we call a diet recall. And they go through a typical day of eating. What from wake up to go to bed, what does your day equal for eating and activity? And then as I'm looking at that, as I'm listening to them, I base my recommendations on that. There are certain red flags that I'm always kind of assuming are going to come up, and that tends to be sugar, tends to be soda. It also tends to be a lot of the high-fat proteins, lots of meat, lots of hot dogs, lots of cheese with the kids. Macaroni and cheese and milk and string cheese tend to be favorites.
String cheese is so good, though.
No, it's delicious.
Actually, all cheese is pretty delicious.
Yeah, and they're good snacks.
Yeah.
But if you have a kid who's eating 10 as opposed to 1 or 2 and having milk and having yogurt and drinking soda, that's when it becomes a problem. String cheese by itself isn't the issue. It's when you add it all up.
The culmination of everything.
Yeah.
For me, as I get older, because I'm not that old, but as I try to watch my diet more, I mean, the biggest thing for me was cutting out soda, because I feel like it was probably the easiest thing I can kind of work around. But I remember I saw this picture. It was like some kid's science experiment. And it was like a bunch of different drinks, and it had like plastic bags. And it was like, oh, this is how much like sugar is in every whatever. And there was like a thing of soda, and it was just like a bag of sugar.
Yeah.
And it was like that was like the moment where I always knew soda like obviously isn't great for you, but it was that real like that visualization of like, oh my gosh, like that's how much sugar I'm putting into my body every time I drink a soda. And I feel like there have been pretty decent steps to like kind of help alleviate that. I know like my high school, after I graduated, they had a movement to remove vending machines from campus. I remember when I was in college, I was like, that's dumb. Like, why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. But now I look back, I'm like, I'm really glad they did that. Like not having that access to soda and just having, drinks, water. I mean, they put like fruit juice in maybe. I don't know how much better that is in a lot of aspects. Who was I with? I think I was with my roommate, and he grabs like a juice or something like that. It's like, oh, this is a nice alternative to soda. I'm like, well, maybe like, what's the juice? Like, how much sugar is in it per glass? And he's like, oh, that's not much better than soda. I thought that's a tricky part too, because you get stuff like, or even for me, when I first gave up soda, I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna get a lemonade today instead of a soda. And I was like, well, wait a minute, the sugar content's almost just the same.
Yeah.
Or was it vitamin water? There was a big thing with vitamin water because they used to promote themselves as a health drink, but they had almost the same amount of sugar content as soda, and I think they actually got in some legal trouble for that. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, even if someone's making the effort to try to change their diet, if they're not, if it's just like they're not reading labels, I guess you could be trying to do better yourself, but you're kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
But I guess another issue too is I feel like meat is kind of an interesting topic in terms of like what's good for you, what's not good for you. Like red meat, I guess, is kind of I mean, I love meat. I know your husband loves meat. You get that big barbecue out there, which we've used many a time. Is that one of those things that's okay in if you watch your proportions, like how much a week you're eating, or is it just one of those things like you try to move away from, or like what are do you have any opinions on like?
No, yeah, there's definitely, I mean, the term everything in moderation, it's around for a reason. So the one thing I say no, absolutely nothing in moderation, it tends to be the soda, only because when you were talking about, soda versus the juice, soda has so many chemicals in it that it's not just about the sugar.
Okay.
Give you another little stat there because you had your cool visual. If you pour dark colas into your tailpipe of your car, it'll totally clean all of that gunk out of it. I've seen
stuff. I actually cleaned a guitar once, like the metal parts with a Coke because I had nothing else to use, and it scared. It did how good of a job it did was kind of scary because people drink that all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So because of that and like what it can do to your teeth, I usually say that's like a no, just get rid of it. And that tends to help with weight and a lot of issues anyway. But then you get into these gray areas of lemonade and juice and same thing with the meats. What's good, what's bad. They're talking about, the paleo diet where meat is great versus the gluten-free, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. But everything but soda, I tend to say there's like sometimes, always, and not so much foods. What we do with the preschoolers is we say go slow whoa, or green light, yellow light, red light foods. It's a nice way of thinking about it.
It's adorable. Like, yeah.
And it's actually,
gonna stick with them.
It's easy for the adults to listen to too. So things like juice, the everyday, the green light food, that's your regular fruit, just full fruit, whole fruit. Your yellow light food, your slow down maybe a couple days a week, that's like 100% juice. Because yes, it has sugar, but yes, it's from the 100% fruit.
Yeah.
And then your red light, slow down on it, maybe have it like for special occasions at birthdays or things like your lemonade and your punch where really it's mostly sugar. But at least it's not the chemicals of the soda.
Yeah.
So then you get into the meats and the proteins, and same idea. Red meat is fine. It's not going to kill you. You should definitely have it sometimes.
One takeaway, red meat is fine.
Yeah.
Red meat is fine. Okay.
But on a daily basis, not so much.
Yeah.
So your best proteins are going to be your plant proteins and your fish. Those are the ones you want to have the majority of the time. So beans and lentils and nuts being your plant proteins. Then you get into the slow down yellow light foods a couple days a week are going to be any of your animal lean meats. So chicken and turkey, your white meats, and also lean red meats are okay sometimes. So like a lean pork would be okay. Maybe a day or two of the week if you're loving your pork.
Yeah.
And then your slow down foods are going to be the fattier meats. So things where you can actually see the fat on the part of the animal. Another kind of weird but good way of thinking about meats is if you can recognize the part where it came from on the animal, and you can actually see where it might move. So like the leg or the breast of the animal, it moves. So like people, that's going to be leaner. You're not going to be as fat if you move.
Makes sense, yeah.
The stomach, the tongue, the rear of the animal doesn't really move so much. So that's going to be not as good of a product. It's going to be a lot fattier. And anything that's ground meat, where you can't recognize it at all, that's where you want to kind of slow down on it.
That makes sense. I never, you talk about lean meat and then like, oh, that's the part that moves. Like, that's why it's lean.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Okay, so there's two things you mentioned that I find interesting. And I don't know why I have trouble saying it. Paleo diet?
Paleo.
Yeah,
I'm sure it doesn't really matter.
I don't know. Paleo. Say it again.
Paleo.
Like that paleo.
Paleo. I like that.
Paleo.
It's got like a accent on it.
Yeah. I'm cultured. That's what it is. I bring a little culture. I actually looked into it for a while, but are you familiar with that diet? So what does that diet sort of consist of?
So if you don't take it all the way to the extreme, paleo is actually pretty darn healthy, especially if you're someone who does a lot of weight resistance exercise versus a lot of cardio, because it's going to replenish the muscle. If you do a ton of cardio, if you're a sprinter, you're going to need a lot more carbs than the paleo diet offers. But the gist of the paleo diet is to get rid of all processed food. So you get rid of anything in a box or in a bag. You're eating a lot of whole animal meats or other types of protein from the plant. No dairy because it's processed. Mostly fruits and vegetables and whole grains like quinoa, things like that.
I had quinoa for the first time the other day.
What'd you think?
It was good. It didn't really have a flavor per se, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah, it's pretty plain.
I had it in the place of rice, which is another issue with white rice, brown rice. I never know what rice to choose. But please continue. We'll get back to the rice question later.
Yeah, we will get back to that. But the problem with paleo, when it started becoming sort of trendy, is that people are taking it to this ultimate extreme where they get rid of everything processed, like getting rid of all dairy. If you don't have an intolerance, you don't need to get rid of milk. And they also, the extreme paleo tends to even get rid of things like beans because you have to technically process the plant to get the bean out. Beans are super healthy. There's no reason to get rid of that. And when taken to the extreme, paleo tends to be very, very high in animal meats for the protein, meaning you're getting really, really high in saturated fat. So if you're someone who's working out a ton with lots and lots of muscle resistance exercise, it's going to be okay. It's probably going to help with your building, your muscle building. For your typical person, it's probably going to be too high in the saturated fat. And because of the super high protein, sometimes we're not getting the right amount of carbs, which is our brain fuel. So people who are doing it to an extreme tend to actually have issues with brain function. You're using protein and fat instead of carb for your brain, which can also lead to issues with your bones. So it can be a problem, just like any diet, really, and taken to extreme.
Well, it's funny too, because like you say, like, oh, you need carbs, and carbs has almost become such like a bad word these days when you talk about diet, because they just think like, oh, I need to cut carbs or whatever. But carbs are power. Like that's how you get through your day. That's how you exist. And it's just funny, like you know, everyone's so obsessed with carbs, but it's like anything you talk about, like a fad diet or whatever, and people kind of get into it, but they don't really know about, you know, the extent of like, okay, you want to cut some carbs, or maybe not, you know, I would guess all carbs aren't equal, or
exactly, it's the type of carb you're eating.
Okay, so that would be a big thing to like, okay, maybe cut bad carbs, but maybe not cut
exactly
the good carbs.
Yeah, it's all about what type. Same thing with the proteins. It's all, just like we talked about, it's all about what type you're eating, because carbs are good for you. Carbs are what you need for your body to work, to have energy, for your brain to function. You can't live without carbs. But you want to have the wholesome carbs, the whole grains, 100% whole grain. You want to have the starchy vegetables as your carb, like a sweet potato is a great source of carb. Beans are great sources of carbs. So you don't have to have bread and crackers. That's what people tend to associate with carbs. And you can get rid of those. That's fine. But you have to have other sources of carb, like fruit too is a carb.
It's totally unrelated, but have you ever seen the movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
No.
Oh, well, you're missing it. Carrying on.
All right.
So before we realized that nothing was recording, I had brought up the topic of gluten.
Right.
The popular scapegoat fad diet evil that is gluten. And I have my own opinions on gluten. and that people tend to overreact when they kind of hear that word in terms of trying to eat healthy. But I just wanted to hear if maybe you can kind of go over just exactly what gluten is and how it affects people and how it doesn't affect people who are not burdened with, I think celiac. I can't pronounce these terms.
Tomato, potato.
There you go. So tell me about gluten and like how, like what it does to people who basically can't digest gluten.
Yeah, so gluten is a protein in wheat, rye, and barley products. All proteins need to be broken down in your system.
Okay.
And people with celiac disease don't have the enzyme that breaks gluten down. So you have all these little hairs on the inside of your digestive system, and when you can't break gluten down, it actually ends up damaging them. And so you have problems with absorption, and you can have problems with your digestion. It can be a really bad thing. So people with celiac cannot eat gluten. They need to just not eat it.
Is it like a more extreme version of like lactose intolerance? Not in the sense of like how it works per se, but maybe how it affects people, like having that disease?
Yeah, kind of. It's a totally different thing when you're thinking like science-wise.
Yeah,
but for the lay like idea,
yeah,
basically you just need to avoid it.
Okay.
But for celiac, it can be actually like a fatal thing.
Yeah.
Whereas lactose is an allergy type of intolerance.
Okay.
Celiac's totally different, but they just need to get rid of it. And then there's a spectrum of gluten intolerance, which is much more akin to the lactose intolerance, where you can eat it, but it's going to be kind of uncomfortable because you're not breaking it down all the way.
Alrighty.
That's what like gluten intolerance is versus celiac, which quite a few people actually they're discovering, and there are a lot of theories out there on why this is going on, why so many people suddenly have this gluten intolerance. What I tend to think and see the most in studies is that when you process a wheat, rye, or barley food, the more processed, the higher the gluten amount. So it's not necessarily that we can't process gluten, is that we can't process so much of it. And that's where this intolerance is coming from. Because a lot of people who have a slight intolerance can actually eat a whole grain. Like they can, for instance, couscous has gluten in it. And someone who has gluten intolerance may be able to eat couscous with no effects, but they can't have bread because it's super processed. So there's this like huge spectrum of gluten intolerance, and you just kind of have to figure out where you fit into that. But it doesn't mean you can't eat it, or even if you do eat it, that it's going to cause damage. It's just going to cause discomfort. And then there are the people who don't have any intolerance or any issues or any allergy to gluten, but they believe that it is healthier to eliminate it. And to some extent it is, which is why this diet became so popular, because you get rid of gluten, you get rid of a lot of processed foods, you get rid of a lot of unnecessary calories.
So it's almost kind of like a causation doesn't necessarily equal causation sort of thing, where by removing gluten from your diet, it's not necessarily the gluten you're removing, but it's the processed foods you're removing, and that's where the health benefits are coming from.
Right.
Okay.
But then there are also people who think that just because it's gluten-free, that makes it healthy, and so they're buying the processed foods that say gluten-free, which is great for people with celiac, that they can have a cracker, they can have bread now because there's all these products that are gluten-free.
Yeah.
But if you take out the gluten, you have to put something back in. So these products tend to be higher in fat and or sugar and or sodium. So people who are just like, oh, gluten-free is healthy, and they're buying these still processed foods, they may actually be doing themselves more harm than good.
And there's even stuff that didn't have gluten in it to begin with, and they're just kind of jumping on the fad for like advertising and promotional purposes.
I actually saw an apple once that said gluten-free.
Really?
Like the apple stand, it was like gluten-free apples. Well, apples never have gluten. So it's kind of funny.
See, that's where it gets frustrating in terms of, you talk about like fad diets and like people, I guess, I mean, it's good in the sense that people are making the effort to try to eat healthier, but like with most things, there's a level of education that you need to have to know exactly what you're, taking the right steps to eat healthier.
Right. Which is why you should see a dietitian.
Exactly. Good plug. See a dietitian. Your heart may just thank you.
Hashtag #rdmegan.
Hashtag #rdmegan. Do you have like a Twitter or anything? Like
don't tweet. I don't. But I do have a website.
You do? So what's your website?
Personalrd.com.
Personalrd.com. I don't know if I figured this out yet, but we'll link it. Maybe there'll be a box, but it'll be in the description. You should start, this is just brainstorming. You should start a dietitian Twitter where you just tweet out random like health facts. And it's like, oh, here's the thing to do today. Like, need more protein, but don't want to eat meat. Have some beans, or, or like, oh, did you know these vegetables are high in protein for you as well? Because like me, when I think protein, I think of essentially think of like dairy products, and I think of meat, and I think of protein powder, and that's a powder. That's not even a food, so that doesn't count. But and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like me who would like to eat healthier, but either don't have the time nor the interest, or are just lazy.
Right.
I might be all three. I don't know. But just, this, resources are, being able to reach out. That's the cool thing with like the internet and Twitter, like being able to kind of reach out, and people could tweet you directly, like, hey,
For sure.
what do you think about this? Like that might be, by the time this goes up, that might even be a thing.
Maybe so.
At rdmegan, Twitter, hopefully.
It is on Instagram.
Instagram too. There you go. So social media, see, that's how you take advantage of social media, is getting everything and being able to kind of deliver a product to the world.
See, my specialty is food and not the social media. So anybody out there wants to do it for me.
There you go. Perfect. Okay. So I have one more big question for you.
Okay, hit me.
As someone who does not necessarily eat the healthiest, but is trying, but what I see as a necessary evil, which is not really necessary, I'm a red-blooded American, and I like fast food. And it's bad. They opened up a McDonald's across the street from my work, and I was like, that's going to be the death of me right there. Big Mac's 30 yards away. Once a week, tops. No, that's a lie. But I try to be good. It's so hard. Chicken nuggets, and if there's something like Coke from there, it's so good. Anyways, obviously most people don't see fast food places as like a healthy option for food. Sometimes, like, they're there, you're hungry.
Right.
Okay. Are there places that maybe that you've maybe seen that are healthier than other places? Like, for example, I know being in Southern California, we have In-N-Out. And I think on the whole, most people will say, well, if you're going to get a cheeseburger, like maybe an In-N-Out burger would be better than another fast food place.
Yeah.
Are there particular places you've seen that maybe like, oh, like, well, if you need to go, or if you have to get fast food, like maybe their options. I always heard like if you get like the chicken sandwich might be a better option than a burger. Or is there I know as a dietitian, even recommending any fast food places might be blasphemous, but like if being what it is, there's fast food places all over the place. What advice can you give people? Like, well, if you have to get fast food, like try to look for these places or look for these kind of.
Realistically, we all eat fast food, especially where we live. Life is fast paced. I eat at fast food too. Yeah. But there are better places, and B, there are better choices within the menus. And especially now, because health is becoming such a hot button topic, that a lot of fast food chains are actually revamping their menus to give some healthier options. Yeah. Let me first state that even the places where I'm going to say like are healthier doesn't necessarily mean they're healthy at all. And it's always better not to. Yeah. But there are some better choices. I like the places where you can build your own type of thing. So places like Subway, their chicken isn't the best and their turkey isn't the healthiest, but you can at least load your sandwich up with vegetables, or you can choose not to have a sandwich at all and have it all on a salad. And you have fat-free condiments that you can put on there. So I do like those kind of places. Even Chipotle, while their portions are crazy huge.
Yes. Which is why they're awesome. Chipotle. Delicious.
You should probably split them between 3 or 4 people. But despite that, you can, build your options. You can choose to have beans and no meat. You can ask them for extra of the fajita vegetables. You can have the brown rice versus the white. So I do like places like that where you can kind of build your own type of thing. In general, I would say always look for keywords. So you were saying, chicken sandwich definitely can be better than a burger unless it's the fried chicken sandwich.
True.
So looking for words like baked or broiled or grilled instead of fried or breaded or cheesy. Yeah. Those are words to look for.
So avoid the delicious words is what you're saying.
No, grilled is delicious.
Yeah, grilled is good. That is fair.
Thank you.
But cheesy, cheesy just sounds delicious.
And that's where I actually like to promote, especially if this isn't so much if you're someone who goes out to fast food every single day. Yeah. But if you're someone who is once in a while, even once a week, pick your favorite at that item, at that place, at that venue. So let's say you're going to In-N-Out and you love their fries more than the burger. You went for the fries. Yeah. Maybe you get the burger protein style. Your bread is the fry and you have the burger protein style. Or maybe you go to Chick-fil-A and you go there because of the chicken burger. That's what you love. Swap out the fries, have your favorite food item, the burger, and have the side salad instead, or the apple slices. Pick your one favorite thing that you're going to that fast food place for and get the healthier option on the side. If they don't have healthier options, if it's a fast food that's just burger and fries and that's your choice, maybe you bring some tangerines in the car with you or some carrot sticks. And again, stick with your favorite thing. Just get the cheeseburger if you wanted the cheese, but don't get the fries and the Coke with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what it comes down to, if you're trying to be someone who is, maybe not fully dedicated, maybe like a full-on dietitian, health whatever, but trying to change their diet, moderation, try to avoid processed foods, and just kind of educate yourself on what you're eating.
Yeah.
I mean, end of the day, that's all you can, the best place to at least start trying to eat healthier, which everyone should. I mean, everyone wants to live as long as they can and try to be as healthy as they can, I would assume.
Exactly. You want to aim for progress, not perfection.
There
Basically.
you go.
There's my little tagline.
There's
right
a
there.
good quote that I was thinking, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Don't, just because I'm never going to be like the healthiest person ever, don't let that discourage you from at least trying to do what you can or start somewhere. Everyone's got to start somewhere when it comes down to.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Megan, I thank you for being my second interview. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun.
I was good. I got to, we got to see your food. We didn't really talk about your food stuff, but you made these, right?
Oh, no, I didn't make them. I bought them.
You bought them.
But they do show portion sizes and how your plate should look. Half fruits and vegetables, 1/4 grain, 1/4 protein.
There you go. That's important. So from the first episode I mentioned, everyone I have on, I want them to kind of create a portrait in their medium of like how you kind of look at a person. So Megan is actually going to create a stir fry meal for me, for someone who I enjoy cooking. However, I don't know a lot of things to cook. I will post the recipe somewhere, probably in the description, or I'm hopefully going to make a blog post for this as well. Do you want to give me a quick rundown of what we're looking at in terms of like what you're going to be cooking up tonight, or what's going to be in that?
Yeah, so you requested a stir fry, so
Yes.
that was my base, but then I also asked you a few questions about what you like, and you said you like chicken, and you don't eat a lot of vegetables, but you like them, and you don't really cook all that much. I also know you because you're Cameron's best friend, and I know you're pretty short on time for the most part, and you're not a millionaire.
Yet.
Not yet.
Just kidding.
So that's kind of what I base the stir fry on. So it's a one pot meal. We're just using a big wok. There's nothing else involved on the stove. We're using a lot of ready to go stuff. So I went to Costco and I got some pre-cooked chicken that is already sliced up. I also got their bag of stir fry mix. So you don't have to chop anything. You don't need to actually decide what vegetables go into anything. I also had some frozen broccoli in my freezer. So we're going to throw that into just to get some extra in there. And that's something that you can store for a really long time.
Yeah.
Because you aren't a big veggie guy, you're more of a meat guy, I'm also going to throw in some edamame just so that we get some extra plant protein in there for the healthy source. All we're going to do is use garlic and olive oil and a little bit of Yoshida's. It's like a teriyaki sauce. Mix it all up, and I have a microwave bag of rice. We're going to put it in the microwave for 2 minutes, dump it in. Dinner should be ready in about 10 to 15 minutes.
See, that's perfect, too, for two reasons. A, for someone who doesn't, let's see, because there's a big I feel like there's a big misconception that eating healthy, A, is hard because you got to prepare a lot of stuff, and it can take a long time. And that it's hard. Like, it's hard to, stir fry is just basically throw everything in a wok and you cook it, and you're doing it 10 minutes. 10 minutes, we're going to have a delicious meal.
Yep.
So the way I'm going to shoot this, we're going to attempt to do a time lapse. We'll see how it goes, and hopefully it's kind of fun. But so I thank everyone for spending the time, for watching us tonight. Once again, if you want to subscribe, favorite, like, comment, tweet me, all that stuff down below. What you do on YouTube, I don't know. I'm still new to this thing. Once again, Megan, thanks for being on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Stick around for that time lapse of a stir fry.